Welcome to the D6 Family Ministry Podcast, a place where ideas, principles, and personalities come together to give you a ministry advantage that empowers the church and home.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here are your hosts, Marianne Howard, Ron Hunter, and Josh Wooten.
Wow, I tell you what, when we travel, do we have habits? Do you have a favorite bag that, you're no matter what happens, whether you're going for 2 days or you're going for a week or whatever, is there one bag that you always pack, and why do you pick it?
Yes. And I have this, it's actually new to me. I think I got it 2 years ago per your daughter's recommendation.
Oh, yeah?
It's kind of an old school vintage. It's not going to be vintage to your daughter, but it's vintage to us, knowing how our grandmothers used to carry their makeup bags. You remember how they used to unzip and almost are tall standing?
Yeah.
It's got a period, it's got all these pockets. You can move all these things around. Well, she found one of those on Amazon. She's like, look at this concept. And of course, my granny has one that's very similar, but I thought, I really love that because it fits in my suitcase, but it's got the everything in it. It just holds everything just right. It's the best overnight kit I could ever.
You were gonna call it a granny bag just for a second.
It is. It's a granny bag. And I believe, Josh, the last time that I was in Nashville staying with you guys, that I took some of your luggage home with me.
I believe you did, because you like to shop, as we learned in previous episodes, not only on Amazon, but in person.
That's right.
For me, I have an old trusty. I wouldn't say it's trusty. It's busted up a little bit, but it's a red suitcase. Ron would be so disappointed, but I'm checking a bag. I don't like dealing with the overhead.
Oh, Josh,
stuff.
you're no longer my friend.
I know. I don't like dealing with it. I don't like being that guy. And so I just check my bag, but I've got this big red suitcase. So easy to spot. I always know it's mine because it's not the prettiest, but she's mine. So, yep. That's my bag I travel with. What about you, Ron?
Goodness. So hold it. I got to unpack what you said. You said,
goodness.
I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to deal with this. Yeah. Now, why do you check a bag?
Because going down the aisles and trying to find, it seems like by the time I get on the plane, the overhead bin space is limited. Yeah. And I like to travel light when I'm on my feet, and I'm always worried about being the guy that doesn't fit. And then I'm inconveniencing people around me trying to find a place to put my big suitcase. And I've got to have, I'm not going to say a woman. I'm a guy who likes shoes, doggone it. And I very rarely wear the same pair of shoes 2 days in a row. So if I'm going on a trip, there's likely one pair of shoes for every day in my bag.
So audience, what he's not saying is the reason why he checks his bag is he has two and he has to check both of them.
Yeah.
Usually it's just one, but the shoes have got to have their own little spot where they're not getting smashed up and whatnot.
Oh my goodness. Well, if Josh likes to travel light, I like to travel quick. I hate standing in lines when I travel. And so I do not want to stand around a luggage carousel and watch a beat up bag that's been sitting out in the rain come circling around the drain back to me. So anyway, I say all that to say I've had two bags since I've been traveling. Same brand. I'm a big fan of this. It's a Victorinox. It's a fold-out suitor. It looks like a normal carry-on bag, but there's a fold-out version that almost looks like it's like a garment bag built into a normal suitcase. I hate garment bags, but this will hang my coats, hang my shirts, hang my pants. And then I've got all the folding stuff, and I can pack for 3 days or I can pack for 2 weeks in that one bag. And it's gone with me everywhere. I went from a 2-wheel version the first 12, 13 years I was traveling to a 4-wheel spinner version because it's just better on my back, but same exact bag, Victorinox fold out suitor. So love it. It is it. So, and by the way, they last. If you travel a lot, cheap luggage does not last. So I'll just say that and move on that part. But
yeah, if anybody from that company is listening, Ron would love an endorsement. I believe he's almost sold me on the idea.
Same.
I may have to go check them out.
Podcasts talking about them. If they give me an endorsement and some money for D6 ministry, we'll be glad to champion that all day long. But yeah, honestly, those and Briggs and Riley are the only two that makes one very similar. And Victorinox is much more affordable than Briggs and Riley, even though they're both great bags. So speaking of bags, our guest today, sorry, Chris, you got us going down a tangent. It's not what we're packing to go on vacation. It's what we're packing in life is what he's going to challenge us with. And I will tell you, I loved hearing the story of him writing the book and how each one of his family members connected with the concept of bags. And I don't want to give it away. I think Chris unpacks this, pun intended, much better than we would ourselves. So let's listen to Chris, and Marianne, Josh, and I will pull everything out, unzip this, and go through it together afterwards. See you on the other side.
Attention all ministry leaders, counselors, and compassionate souls. Are you seeking to make a real difference in the lives of those grappling with emotional pain, addiction, or crisis? Your guide has arrived. Introducing First Aid for Anxiety by Dr. Edward E. Moody Jr. Dr. Moody, a seasoned counselor, pastor, and educator, offers his profound insights in this groundbreaking book. With over 3 decades of experience in helping others, he's here to guide you through the maze of emotional and mental health challenges. First Aid for Anxiety is not just a book, it's a comprehensive toolkit. It provides an extensive list of resources and contacts for professional help, offering an excellent overview of situations faced when aiding someone suffering from emotional issues, addiction, and mental health crises. Order your copy of First Aid for Anxiety today. Visit d6family.com.
We are joined today by Mr. Chris Sasser. Chris is the pastor of family ministries at Port City Community Church in Wilmington, North Carolina. He has served in ministry since 1993, working with children's, middle school, high school, college, and parent ministries. That's pretty much everybody in the church, isn't it? He has a passion for equipping and encouraging parents and leaders to help the next generation walk with God. He's the author of the book, Bags, Helping Your Kids Lighten the Load. That's what we're going to be talking about today, Chris. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thanks for being here.
Oh, yeah, glad to be here. Thanks.
So I would say that most parents genuinely care about their kids' physical well-being, some their spiritual well-being, and I think in recent years there's been a push for emotional and mental health, which I feel is appropriate, obviously, for a child's overall wellness. But I think maybe we have missed the mark a little bit in thinking about how our emotional and mental health can affect our spiritual health. Am I correct in that? And if so, tell me, how does that play out?
Oh, I think you're totally correct. I think kind of everything that you've mentioned, the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual, they just so weave together. And actually, as I've written the book and been kind of talking to parents in a lot of different ways, what I've said is as a parent, I've had to kind of redefine what I think success looks like. And for me, normal parenting is, hey, let's, get my kid in the right school, and let's, make sure they're getting the best grades and, all the sports, and to the right college, make the right money. And then, it's kind of the quote unquote American dream success. For me, success is exactly what you led with. It is health.
Yeah.
I want my kids to be healthy mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and relationally. And the four of those go hand in hand every single day because we can't separate, how we're doing spiritually with how we're doing mentally and emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think in some ways parents try to separate things and they try to think, oh, I'm going to let my kid be spiritually healthy by sending them to church or you make sure they're in a small group or go to Sunday school or whatever. And they kind of compartmentalize it. Oh, I want them to be, physically healthy, so they're going to be in a sport, and let's just kind of drive them over there. And the mental and the emotional part is where I think the alarm bell has gone off because we've realized how not paying attention to all of it together is really dragging our kids down in a big way. So, yeah, I think that, in some ways parents get caught up in pushing their kids to be quote unquote successful, which is why we miss how all of this blends together and how important it is.
Yeah. So how can we as parents make sure that as we're discipling our kids, we're discipling the whole person to follow and honor Jesus? How can we do that?
Oh my gosh. I think we got to
Do we have time?
No, we don't. And we need more smarter people than me in here to figure that out. But I do think, for me, it's really making sure we're paying attention to what's going on with our kids. One of the ways that I said it, kind of during the pandemic, our church kind of did what a lot of churches did, create a lot of content online for people to watch and people to kind of consume, if you will, at home, right? We're watching church services and we're creating, videos for kids and teenagers, whatever. And I remember talking to a parent on a Zoom group during that, and she was thankful for what we were providing as a church, but what she said is what I really need is connection, right? I need connection to my church. And I just started thinking, how do we apply that to parenting? And I think with our kids, what we need, we're good at providing content from a very early age. Here's how you kind of tie your shoe. Here's what you got to do to kind of be successful in school. Here's how you got to, hit the ball if you're going to be on the team, whatever. We're nonstop as parents providing content. What our kids really want is connection. So to answer your question is we have to be connected to our kids relationally in such a way that we know what's really going on in their heart. And as church leaders, I think we need to drive parents to understand that, to really talk about the importance of the depth of relationships, to really help them realize, okay, this worldly quote unquote success that I just mentioned that so many parents strive towards, it's not really that important. For me, I've sort of changed the target on parenting. The bullseye for me is my kids get to their 20s and they're healthy in those four areas that we kind of talked about, right? And so as church leaders, I think in order to kind of pay attention to all of this, we've got to drive people towards relationships. And if we can drive people towards relationships more and more, then we have the opportunity, especially with our kids, to share the most important relationship. And that is our relationship with God and really help them unpack the gospel. So I don't even really know if that answers your question, but it's really, it goes to connection over content for parents in general and us as church leaders, if you're one of those, making sure that you help your parents understand that and how important that is.
Yeah. I think we all have baggage in some form or fashion.
Preach.
Some we have dealt with, some we haven't acknowledged, right? How, as parents, we have our own baggage. How do we be careful not to pack bags for our own kids?
Well, the first step is being aware of kind of what your own baggage is. And I do think, and this is what I try to do in the book, is just to give us some kind of language and some handles around what our baggage is. Because I do think as adults, we know there's something kind of nagging at us. We know there's something that impacted us when we were in middle school or high school, or we know that there was a relationship that went awry that's impacting us in some way. But it doesn't always surface until, sometimes in ugly ways later in life. But what I've tried to do is give people language around, okay, here are some categories to pay attention to when it comes to baggage. And that's really what kind of the book does. Is there's these 8 sort of common bags, if you will, that kids pack that we as adults are struggling with. So first, it's sort of about awareness for yourself as an adult. What bags do you have? And really, it's funny. So when I first started writing the book, my wife, she's great, but she was less than excited about it. And I couldn't figure out why. And finally one day I sort of invited her into, hey, I need this whiteboard session to kind of figure some things out. And a light bulb went off for her because what she heard me saying was sort of the question that you asked. It's, hey, as parents, we have a lot of baggage, and let's make sure we're not, putting all of our baggage onto our kids. And who wants to read about that?
Right.
It's kind of that was her thought process.
Yeah.
But the light bulb that went off was, oh, wait a minute. Coaches pack bags, teachers pack bags, peers pack bags, culture packs bags. Like there's so many different things that play into the emotional baggage that our kids are carrying. So as parents, number one, we need to kind of know what our bags are, but we also need to recognize that the baggage, if you will, that our kids are packing, it is so much bigger than anything we can heap on them. Mm-hmm. And so it goes back to the connection and the relationship. If we don't have a connection and relationship with our kids, we are not going to be able to see kind of really what's going on inside their heart and their mind to know, oh, this is a comparison bag that she's packing right now. And, maybe there's a way that we can step in and help with the comparison bag. And so awareness about yourself, awareness about kind of what's going on in the world, and then just having practical steps and tools kind of along the way to help your kids not pack all of these bags. I'm not naive enough to think that we're not going to pack any bags because we all do. We all will. Mm-hmm. But man, what if I could just get my kids to their young adult years and they just be a little bit lighter?
Yeah.
Just lighten the load.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
So.
We are talking about helping your kids lighten the load with Chris Sasser. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
The D6 Conference is thrilled to present a lineup of more than 70 experts specializing in family ministry who are ready to inspire, challenge, and equip you with strategies for generational discipleship. Guided by the teachings of Deuteronomy 6, which calls for a love for God and a full-hearted engagement with His Word and impressing His Word on the hearts of families, the D6 Conference is meticulously crafted to instruct, empower, and inspire ministry leaders, parents, pastors, and volunteers to embody the vision and mission laid out in this sacred text. This event stands as a premier family ministry conference, offering invaluable opportunity for your entire team to be inspired, engage in idea exchanges, and foster new relationships with like-minded church leaders. With the choice of breakout sessions led by leading voices in family ministry, you're guaranteed to walk away equipped with practical tools and resources that will prove instrumental in your ministry. Whether in Orlando or Seattle, we invite you in 2024 to be a part of this transformative conversation and explore how you can adopt an all-inclusive approach to discipleship for both your church and your home. Don't miss out on this chance to elevate your discipleship approach. Register now at d6conference.com.
So we are back. I love the fact that you were just talking about how we want to get our kids just a little bit lighter.
Yeah,
like we're
sure.
going to be packing bags and just trying to be intentional. One of the things that you said was like to name it. Do you think that's appropriate to do with our kids? Like call it out in the moment with them to say, let's talk about what's happening here and call this what it is? Or is it one of those things that we as parents process and then kind of let them figure out as they go? Or how does that work?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that you have to sort of figure out, hey, is this a situation, where it's a good one to name it right now? But I also think that, yes, it is super important to talk about this stuff with our kids. And I'll give you kind of an example. So when I was first kind of putting this project together, I think my son was 12 at the time. Our daughter was 10. And there was a particular kind of story that I had written for the book and kind of the family knew about and was going to put it in there kind of about my daughter. So he and I go to a father-son camp out. And one of the exercises kind of late night was, hey, you're going to kind of get together with your son and y'all are just going to pray for each other. And so, you have to tell each other what's something you want to pray for. So I told him, hey, I'd love for you to pray for kind of me, which is writing this book and kind of this thing. And he, as the 12-year-old, says to me, hey, Dad, like, I know you've written that story about Kylie and kind of what's going on there. I think you need to be careful as you kind of talk about that bag that you're not packing another one.
Wow.
Yeah. So the 12-year-old got it.
Oh my. Right?
And so for us, what we've been able to do, because we've named it, kind of generally speaking, we've been able to have conversations with our kids as they were, my daughter's 16 now, our son's 18. So for the last 6 years about what does it look like for you to be packing emotional bags. I think that's incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
Right? They understand the weight that they might carry if they pack bags in these certain areas. And so it hasn't been let's sit down and talk about the authority bag tonight, or, hey, like, you're packing some authority baggage. But it has been just some subtle conversations along the way. And then you reference, hey, like, you're struggling with authority now, and that could impact you later. Not necessarily using the baggage language, but still attacking the issue.
Yeah.
Because what I've said all along, that this is about awareness and preventive maintenance. Got to be aware of what's happening with my kids. And then I want to build kind of a preventive maintenance plan along the way to help them just have a little bit of a lighter load. So I think it's valuable to name it in some way. And I would say our kids get it more than maybe we think they do.
Yeah. What are some ways that we can ensure that our kids honor God in every way, even with the way they handle difficult situations that someone might be labeling them as, oh, that could be baggage, there are situations that we can't keep our kids from.
Oh, yeah.
And so we want to equip them, like you're saying, to handle those moments and to walk through those with them.
Yes.
What are things that we can do that maybe you can equip some parents with right now to say, hey, if your child is walking through something, if you see things like that you're concerned about, here are some steps, some things that you need to do.
I would say number one is recognize they're not always going to honor God as they walk through those situations. I think sometimes as Christian parents, we can set up the expectation that, hey, we think they understand the gospel. Maybe they've been baptized. Maybe they are, in youth group. Maybe they're reading their Bible. Like, they're on the journey of faith. And so therefore they're going to honor God in all they do. Well, no, they're not, right? Because I don't.
Right. Yeah.
And so to expect my, teenager or my young kid to do that is setting the bar, I think, too high. And that's where grace comes in. And so being able to sort of build your home, around sort of the culture of grace is what I would say. That's not that you're not holding them accountable for things that they're doing and you're not, having the right conversations and challenging them. However, you have to lead with that grace, which again goes back to the connection and the relationships. If all I care about is behavior modification, they're not going to, they're not going to modify their behavior in the long run, and B, they're not going to understand the gospel and grace. And so as a parent, I got to back off a little bit, recognize that they're not going to always honor God. But then I would say you have to be consistent as a parent in the way that you try to honor God. That's the biggest thing that teaches them is when you try to do it yourself. The one of the biggest things that I hear from teenagers in my church sometimes is that, mom and dad bring me here and they want me to learn this stuff and they want me to get it, but they're not really living it out at home. And so it's just so confusing for kids, especially when they get into their teenage years. And so sort of modeling what it means to be a follower of Jesus, modeling what it means to ask for forgiveness, modeling what it means to try to, encourage other people all along the way. That is the most sort of practical thing I think we can do as parents in order to help our kids see it. And really what it comes down to, and it's one of the bags, it comes down to identity and trying to help our kids grab onto an identity of I am a child of God. Like, we actually went through that exercise with our kids. It was a dinner table conversation. And I was kind of trying to test out, say, hey, like, how what are they thinking with this? And I had them fill in the blank. I want you to fill in the blank. I am blank. Like, was he going to say, I am a football player? Was she going to say, I'm a good student? Like, what were they going to say? What I want them to say is, I am a child of God. That's the identity that they live from in everything they do. Well, guess what? If I want them to say that, I have to be able to say that. And I have to live that out. So, long answer, like, the practical thing to do is to live out your identity in Christ and model it in front of them.
Yeah. What about the parent who has baggage they themselves haven't dealt with? Does that hinder them at all from being able to disciple their kids?
No.
Or how do they handle that as they're moving forward?
Yeah, well, first of all, get counseling yourself, right? Because if your child was dealing with, some really heavy issues like that, that's probably what you'd want to do, is to get your child to either a counselor or a pastor or someone who could help them walk through it. Well, you need to do that yourself. And I think that is another way of modeling. It's modeling for your child, hey, I cannot do this on my own. I need community. I need help. but it is not too late. And one of the things, because I've had some conversations with some parents of adult children who are struggling with exactly the question you're asking, and my advice to them is go to your child and apologize. Like, you need to say to your child, hey, I may not have been as kind of good of a disciple in my life. I may not have been, walking the walk that I was asking you to walk by taking you to church. Will you forgive me for that? Like, ask them for forgiveness. Because again, you're modeling what you're doing with God. You're asking God for forgiveness for what you've done. So I'd say start there is, ask for forgiveness and then just take whatever the next right step is, right? You can't necessarily go make up for all the lost time, but you can do what's right tomorrow. You can pray for your child tomorrow. You can encourage them with some scripture tomorrow. And if you get to a point where they're looking at you and they're like, yeah, but you might be a little bit of a hypocrite because I know what you did last year. You have to have kind of grace with that. Like, you can't, I haven't been in this situation, but I don't think as a parent you can go, yeah, but now no, I'm sorry for that. I apologize. Will you forgive me? Just kind of keep saying that over and over again. And at some point, I would imagine their heart would soften and they would see that there is a true, genuine change, that you do have a new identity. Like, you're a new creation in Christ now, even though you weren't 2 years ago when you were asking me to be. You are now. And I see that. And hopefully, if they're kind of, either young adult or even older adult children, they have the maturity to see that you're authentic with it.
Yeah. Consistency over time.
It's consistency over time. And it's just, you've lost some time, but you have some time.
Right.
So take advantage of the time you have.
Yeah.
And don't lament the lost time.
Exactly. Well, Chris, thank you so much for sharing that with us today. You all pick up his book, Bags, Helping Your Kids Lighten the Load. It'll be a great resource for you and your children's ministry, friends, family members. Pass it along. Thanks for being here, Chris.
Thank you so much.
Chris, you are so creative, and I loved your book. It was excellent. It was very timely for me. So if you guys are looking for a really good book that kind of deep dives into what he's talking about, I highly recommend it. Guys, I really feel like the thing I'm so challenged by, just in an overarching way, is he's really challenging us to make sure as parents we're not compartmentalizing and going on the seen, but making sure we're going on the unseen. Does that make sense? Because he's talking about being mentally, spiritually, and emotionally healthy. And I think so many times my eyeballs can get really focused on the compartmentalization of what I can see in my children. But what we've got to have is the spiritual eyes to see the unseen, if that makes sense, to generational discipleship and a holistic approach. That's what he's really helping us to think differently in how we see our children.
And I think that for me, one of the things that really opened up my eyes, it ties right in with D6. When we're to love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength. Yeah. And, so often we judge success by, what our kids are doing on a field or in school and grades. But, the mental and emotional success of our children gets neglected. Yeah. And I think that's a great tie-in when you look at scripture throughout, different verses that tell us to love the Lord with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength. There is that mind, body, soul in there. That is a key component of it. Yeah. And the way that he said, we need to disciple the whole person. Really, it was a good reminder.
I know parents who would never be legalistic about things that we use the term legalism for, but Josh, you bring up that sports. I could bring up academics, but we pack performance, which I think is the cousin of legalism. We pack our kids' bags with performance. We pack their bags with expectations that somehow they just can't measure up to what we're demanding of them. I loved his reminder not to expect our kids to always make godly decisions. Mm-hmm. And if it weren't enough to leave it right there, he had to hit that punch one more time because we don't do it either.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Chris, for that reminder. And he's so right. He's so right.
So right. It's perfect. Oh, go ahead, Ron.
No, go for that. I was going to change gears on another comment he said, but go with that.
Well, it's the truth. We need, I think it goes down. That's the perfect way to make the heart connection.
It
To
is.
admit as parents, I understand you did make a godly choice here, but I'm not judging you for it because I don't always get it right either.
Yeah.
As parents, he made the statement, we provide content for our children, but what we really need to focus on is providing heart connection to find out what is really going on in their hearts. And Dr. Richard Ross, everybody,
Yeah.
says this over and over. Heart connection is everything.
Yeah. I really liked his reminder to pay attention to unintentionally packed bags. He was discussing writing, in his book about a story with one of his kids. And I believe he said it was his 13-year-old, his young son said, "Hey, Dad, in your goal of teaching all the people who's reading your book, are you not also packing a bag that's going to be hurtful to my sister?" I'm like, ouch, what wisdom from his kiddos that he's gleaning from that. And Chris self-admittedly goes, "Hey, my son gets this. He truly gets this." When Pam and I go on vacation, not only do I pack my bag, do not check it, but I pack a duffel bag, an empty bag inside my bag so that my wife has the freedom to shop for those souvenirs because I know she's not going to leave room in her suitcase. I'm not going to have, and we're going to have this bag. And we're like, how are we getting this home? Well, I've got yet another bag inside of my bag I can whip out and go, "Okay, baby, pack it right in here." So my question in there is, what empty bag are we packing together as a family that we shouldn't pack, the way in Chris Sasser language?
I'm thinking of a moment at D6 conference a few years ago where it literally took me, Lauren, Jackie, and Lena to get my suitcase together to get home. We are all on this suitcase. And I'm telling you, you have got to ask Lena and Lauren about this moment because
I've heard stories, Marianne.
It's just embarrassing. But figuratively speaking of what you're saying, I think there's a lot of things to evaluate with that question. And where are we wasting time?
Yeah.
What are we engaging in that we may need to stop as a family so that we can be intentional about heart connection? We're not going to recline. We're not going to recline into heart connection. We're not going to all sit on the couch and be on our devices and hope by the time they graduate that we are connected.
Yeah.
So there's got to be this, everybody put your phones face down. We got a new game. We're starting to be a game family because that's helping us be intentional. We got a new game called Ransom Notes. Highly recommend it. They're little words and it's got a little magnet face. And basically there's a prompt and you have to use the words that you have been given. You get just a little handful of words and they're magnets and you have to build a sentence to respond to the prompt. And you guys, this is a fun game.
Yeah.
It started to create, number one, build creativity into my boys. Number two, we're laughing at funny things. But number three, we're off our phones.
Yeah.
And we're using words with each other and bringing out laughter. So anyway, that's just another random, I love your question, Ron. I think it's something we have to walk away with and evaluate. What are the bags that we're stacking full that we shouldn't be?
Yeah. To our listeners, you never know what you're going to get with the three of us for sure. If my wife were up here, she'd probably elbow me and go, that's out of bounds, wrong question to ask. But Marianne, I'm going to give you that prerogative to go, okay, Josh and Ron, you can't ask this, but how often does the average lady go through their purses and get rid of things that they did not realize they'd collected? I think that's the appropriate question to ask at this point as we close out the podcast. Yeah. Am I in trouble now?
No, it is a really good illustration because I think more so in the older days before the fanny pack years, we're in the fanny pack years, so the purses are smaller. But back in the day, and Pam and I, and probably Lena, we had some deep purses where I mean to tell you,
Yeah.
they're mama purses. We're ready with a paddle. No, just
Yeah,
kidding.
yeah.
We're ready
No.
with some crazy gum. There's some tissue down in there. There's nose spray. I mean, there's a lot of things down in there. And you're exactly
Yeah.
right. I think you're very right in the heart sense.
Yeah. Well, guys, I'm not going to let us off the hook. For Josh and I, it's probably the center consoles in whatever vehicle we drive. It's
Oh,
probably the
yes.
exact same thing.
But I may need that. At some
Exactly
point.
right. I was
That melted chapstick.
Well, I was
That's
helping my
so-
mother-in-law yesterday, and I said, "Where's your screwdriver?" She says, "Oh, I only have these little bit." I mean, they were flimsy little flat ones, and it dawned on me, I've got a universal one in my console, and I went out to my console and I grabbed a screwdriver. I mean, we pack everything thinking we're going to need it, and then there's a lot of junk in there that we just don't
Yeah.
need. Chris,
So
thank
true.
you for that reminder of things that we need to pack in our lives, things we don't need to pack, and to make sure we're not packing things into our kids' lives with that baggage that they will carry forth generationally. We could spend probably a series listening to Chris. And if you like this topic, you just need to get his book. You need to dive in. You need to read it with a pen. You need to read it with your spouse and really figure out what you're passing along unintentionally into the bags of your kids. We'll see you guys next week. Thank you, as always, for listening to the D6 podcast.
You've been listening to the D6 podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.